Welcome to the Taonga Files, the podcast that reconnects whakapapa, mātauranga, and the journeys of Taonga Māori. Ko Migoto Eria ahau.
Ko Amber Aranui tēnei, through research, Taonga speak, revealing where they've travelled, who they've touched, and what they carry.
So let's step beyond the register as we uncover stories that shape who we are.
These stories were never lost. They were just waiting to be found.
So in this kōrero, we're just going to focus on Hauora in terms of context of Taonga. I'm just sitting here thinking the synonymous nature of Hauora and Wellbeing, but not to limit either of those kupu, but that there is a role for Taonga to play in a lot of people's lives. And so we think about all of these taha or sides that we have in terms of our Hauora. And what does the presence of Taonga or the resonating nature of Taonga have on our Hauora? As a person that's been in this mahi for the length of time that I have, it definitely has had a significant impact on my Hauora and continues to, and teaches me a lot about my Hauora as well. In a brief that we did, we talked about the definition of Taonga, and there are some threads in there that are also relevant to this same kōrero, rarity, treasured possessions. And we were talking about the definition of Taonga. But there's something in here as well, in Hauora, and that being a Taonga as well. Maybe, i te reo Māori kare te ki e Taonga mea katoa, but maybe everything is a Taonga, according to Migoto. And particularly in this context, Hauora, this is the Taonga that we're speaking about at this time. So I just want to invite Amber to share your whakaaro and what you found too with Te Whare Tapa Whā.
Yeah, well, I thought, in talking about well-being and Hauora, we can't go past talking about Te Whare Tapa Whā, developed by Sir Mason Jury in 1984. And it's a model that describes health and well-being in the shape or the form of a wharenui or a meeting house with the four walls. And so these aspects, I think, are really important for us in terms of the hauora we receive from working with Taonga and actually the hauora that we need when working with Taonga. So I think there's two
Kia ora.
kind of aspects there that I think we should touch on. But those 5 aspects of Te Whare Tapa Whā, first of all, there's taha wairua, which is your spiritual hauora. Taha hinengaro, your mental and emotional. And I think that's really important when it comes to Taonga, either working with or being touched by Taonga. There's also taha tinana, your physical well-being. Taha whānau, so your family and your sort of social context that you're in. And also whenua, your land, your roots, where you come from, how you ground yourself. And so I think each of those 5 aspects, we should talk about in terms of what it's like working within a whare taonga, within a museum, being surrounded by Taonga, or maybe things that we've experienced when whānau hapu iwi come in and they have that connection and that some of that hauora that they get from reconnecting with their Taonga. I think that's, beautiful.
As you were talking about our whānau hapu and iwi reconnecting with their Taonga, I'm just thinking of, I guess, the numerous beka houses that we've ever hosted, and there's a bit of a build-up, I guess, that goes unseen of expectation and making sure that not only is your own hauora intact, but that you will be taking everyone else's hauora, on board in their experience here. And that extends to taha wairua as well. And I think for a lot of our people who haven't been inside museums before or even for a long time, it has an impact when they first or revisit that. And it's that space there, that impact, that resonating nature and keeping our people safe at that particular time. So, as people that they've worked in the museums for a long time, we see that. We see that impact. We feel that impact. The build-up that I talked about, I guess that's something that I do that goes unseen, perhaps unspoken. And I guess too, just to reflect on that, to leave it unchecked is something as well, because the energy and I guess the wairua you put into that mahi, it's not a tap. And you've got to keep an eye on that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Keep an eye on that with our colleagues and our mates, and also our whānau that come in, because we don't know what's happening in people's lives at the time.
Right.
We've had all sorts of walks of life come into this whare, right?
Yeah.
Just taking our people as they are, where they are in their lives, but also not forgetting where we are as individuals on that journey and that pathway. So I think after all the years I've spent doing this, I still have that build-up. I still have quite high expectations of myself, and I don't think I keep that in check as well as I should. So I'm just sort of turning that around a bit. I've got to sort of take responsibility for that as well, because if I can't put my own oxygen mask on, then I can't help anybody else, right?
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where this is what Taonga does, because we understand that impact. But I just want to ask Hauora if you can share with us that I guess it's like there's a responsibility, right? Or a stewardship that we have. We use the word kaitiaki, but when it comes to kaitiakitanga of wairua and for yourself, if you can share with us, what's your whakaaro on that, Hauora?
I think definitely with Te Wairua, it's important that people understand that Taonga, they have a life force. They're not just objects or dead objects. And working in a museum and with Taonga and also with tupuna over this time, you get a short, sharp dose of reality in terms of what Te Wairua means for this museum space.
Yeah.
And so, you need to talk to people. You need to understand what you're going into, and for your own well-being, but like you say, also for those who come and visit, because we've seen it. We've seen people come in to reconnect with Taonga, and it really affects people.
Yeah.
Some people you find they can't stay inside those Taonga spaces for too long, and it really affects them. And actually it affects us in some ways too. So we've got to look after ourselves and make sure when things are getting too much that we take ourselves out of those spaces and reset. But actually kind of on that, and I want to throw this back at you, is in terms of that importance of the kind of spiritual nature of the mahi we do, I think it's just, we should maybe touch on the importance of karakia in terms of the work we do and why we do that.
Well, I guess it's again back to that same stuff. You'd mentioned it in Te Whare Tapa Whā. We've talked about it in the definition of Taonga. And what karakia does, and I guess with a lot of our tikanga, you're recreating a space that's ancient. You're using our kupu from our tupuna or our tipuna, our ancestors, really loose translation, perhaps even superficial. You're calling upon your ancestors for guidance, but actually you are also recreating an environment that when they were here, that they used to do. And not to say that, oh man, I was there. I was definitely not here 100 years ago. But it's minding that not only do we need to look after our taha tinana, we also need to take care of both our wairua and hinengaro. And that's what karakia does. It acknowledges those two taha. And it's important because, for those who come on these back of house tours with us, for some of us maybe going through some really difficult things in our lives, it acknowledges that. And I know it gets into quite a challenging space of which religion, which hahi, all that kind of stuff. But I think the intention is to acknowledge taha wairua and taha hinengaro, or, the mental well-being and our spiritual well-being. And that's the role of karakia. Karakia, all of our tikanga, Taonga, all of these things are not intended to exclude people or to punish people or to make them feel inferior. The reason why I say that is that I've experienced that firsthand many times, unfortunately, sadly, but I do want to acknowledge it because as a person that's spoken the reo my whole life and been raised in Te Māori, it still happens to people like me. And so to better get around that and be courageous, you need to point it out. You need to call it out. So karakia is intended to be all-encompassing and inclusive and to create safety And this is why I don't challenge when people are saying, oh, but that karakia is Christian. I'm like, mate, it's a karakia.
You're right, it's the intent.
Because you know what? I'm going to do a rātana one. And if you've got a problem with that, well, that's just too bad. Or you do one, you know? Or, oh, that was in English. And what? So, you know, that's the thing that I want to share with the listeners is being in this space and well-being, particularly around Taonga every single day, and the role of our tikanga like karakia, Kōiwi, Karanga, kōrero, te reo, all of those things, that the intention is to create safety. I know that at the moment, well-being is quite a big conversation socially, and that Hauora, a little bit like how we talked about in Taonga, isn't limited to just Māori people. Because, of course, we have non-Māori people working with us, absolute experts and passionate at what they do.
Yep.
This isn't to diminish their Hauora either. But, yeah, it's just a reminder. Karakia, it's a reminder, acknowledgement, intention.
Let's talk a little bit about emotions. I myself, I'm a highly emotional person, but actually, you know, the years I've just learnt to it is what it is, you know. Yeah, I can cry at the drip of a hat, but that's fine. But yeah, I think, you know, talking about the emotional side of the mahi that we do and being open and honest about that, I think it's be interesting to kind of kōrero a little bit about that. Yeah, I think for me, when I think about the emotional side of the work, I think straight to working with our tupuna, doing the work of repatriation to bring them home. That can be incredibly emotional on all different types of levels, whether it's doing the research and, you know, you're not even physically with them, but you're uncovering the things that have happened to them. And I remember when I first kind of started the mahi in the repatriation team, I was angry quite a lot, would swear and think to myself, how can people do this? And it took I would say a good couple of years before I sort of had to talk to myself and said, you know, you're not doing anyone any good by just being angry about it. It was in the past, it happened. It's the reality of what it is. You're here to help, you know, facilitate righting those wrongs. So you've got to focus on finding them, getting them home and getting them back to their people. You know, don't sit there stewing on it and, you know, just winding yourself up. So that's kind of something that, you know, I guess in terms of our hine ngaro, that I kind of had to work through. I think I'm a lot better about it now. You know, nothing surprises me about this mahi that we're doing in terms of learning about the history of Taonga or tupuna. You know, I've seen and read it all about all the horrible things that have happened in the past. And I wouldn't say I'm numb to it. It still affects me. It's still sad. It still angers me, but I don't let it affect me as much as I used to. But what about yourself?
Well, I don't think of it in a emotional state. All of those things, if I've responded emotionally, are experiences. And I've perhaps I compartmentalize them too much. I sort of back them away as the experience for that specific thing that had triggered me into an emotional state. But as you were talking about the work alongside tupuna, you know, the anger, and I guess I was hearing a lot of expectation and responsibility that you had as a kaimahi doing that quite important mahi. Of course, one is elevated to a state of high emotion, and rightly so. What sort of sometimes, and not in regards to what you've talked about, e hoa, but sometimes I get a bit hoha with emotion being a means to reduce somebody's experience. She's just being emotional. It's like, hey, I'll be emotional, man. Far out, you know, and that there's nothing wrong with being emotional at all. And I guess that's probably the good thing about how progressive we become, you know, when we acknowledge it as the mahi that we do, its importance, responsibility, acknowledge that, you know, oh man, I was angry about that. I have to be completely honest. I still have a lot of anger for a lot of things that are unresolved because I have high expectations that I would just deal with it. Something that I was reminded of when you were talking about the emotional was te oranga wahine, well-being of wahine or well-being of women, particularly in the space that we work in. I'm going to flip it and, rather than go to a space of deficit, but more of a space of power. And the role of wahine in our taha Māori and in all our tikanga, we should never compromise or undermine because we are emotional. Because you know what? Karanga is an emotion too. And that's not at all diminishing that. Karanga, you're not only calling upon the assistance of Hinenui Te Pō and all of our tupuna and our, māreikura, you're talking about the creation of life. You're talking about the enduring nature of life. You're talking about every time one of your tupuna, tamariki mokopuna, have been born and have died. And for people to reduce it to being an emotional female really gets on my wick. So this is why this is interesting, talking about hauora, because you have all facets of hauora that you bring with you, your oranga wahine, oranga tāne, or if you're an other that's an oranga as well, rangatahi pakeke kaumātua. There is an oranga to all of those facets, and some, or if not all, and which need to be acknowledged, and something that this space, working inside this space, we're having to look at a lot and look at ourselves. We get asked, I feel like I get asked that a lot by our people that come and visit on back of house tours. How do you look after yourself? This must be hard.
Yeah.
I've always found every single time I'm stumped to answer because I have an expectation to give this auntie or this kuia an amazing answer or a satisfying answer. But in fact, no answer is an answer too, because they're acknowledging that this mahi is hard, but that they're showing concern. And I think there's a role that our kaumātua and kuia play in going, just checking on you.
Yeah, yeah. It's important, eh?
Absolutely.
It's important, and they care, and they know that the mahi that we're involved in within the museum space can be heavy.
Yes.
And they want to make sure that we are being looked after, looking after ourselves. And I think that responsibility is something that's not just ours, but it's also the institution, whatever institution that is that we belong to, They also have an obligation to ensure that our hauora is being cared for.
And so I'm just also wanting to acknowledge, the many kaumātua that we've had and the aroha tautoko manaakitanga that they've poured into us, over the years. What happens to that, when we don't have them anymore because we've been through long spells when they haven't been here,
Yeah.
Or we have a change of perhaps even our Eria residences, you change. And I just sort of wanted to maybe extend on your kōrero about the role of the institution. Perhaps more specifically, our oranga of our taha Māori. What do you think are some of the challenges that our institution might have in understanding that?
I mean, do we want to be specific about our institution or institutions in general?
General.
Yeah. I guess we have to be given the opportunity to be who we are, to embrace our taha Māori, to be able to be Māori. And also maybe I think there needs to be the acknowledgement that no matter where we work, is that we are Māori first and we're, from our perspectives, an employee second. So first and foremost, I am Māori. Second of all, I'm a curator. And, as long as there's that understanding, because there are going to be cultural situations where we're just going to have to excuse ourselves or participate in that some workplaces may not be understanding of, and it's not that they don't want you to participate, but it's just that they don't have an understanding. So maybe an institution in that sense needs to, educate themselves in many ways about what your employees need, particularly if they're Māori, if they're Indigenous to a place. I don't know, there are things that need to be acknowledged or need to be understood.
I was just thinking, then you reminded me of Te Māori in the 80s, and not to drag this out too far, I know it's going way over time. There was an acknowledgement that our Taonga going overseas had a huge impact on our people. And it took all of our kaumātua and all of those taonga to go to New York for there to be acknowledgement that these are, you know, really high quality pieces of art, for example. However, the unspoken acknowledgement that, you know, I hope in our episodes that we'll start to slowly unpack is that that was also part of our oranga or our hauora as Māori people, and the attempt or the attempts and efforts to bring home those learnings to our people, for our taonga to travel all the way over there to be in an art gallery. It took those drastic actions for that sort of impact to happen. That's also about hauora. And for the first time, Māori had to really think, what, our taonga are by themselves, we better go. Yeah, we better go. Of course. Yeah. You know?
And it showed that there is that continual and unbroken connection between the people of that day and those taonga, even though some were hundreds of years old. You know, there wasn't a disconnect, which I think, again, is part of that hauora, is that you're reconnecting, you're acknowledging your history, and I think you're right, it took for that to happen, for Te Māori to happen, even for Aotearoa, for New Zealand to understand, you know, the importance of taonga for the people who connect to them.
You know, that same thing of, you know, our mātauranga and all of our tikanga are not, you know, it's not a lost culture. We are still Māori. We still do those things. We still make those things. Yeah. We still acknowledge those things, you know, every day. And you would stop to think and go, what did taking all of those things to New York, why would that impact so much on those people? All these years later, 40-something years later?
Yeah.
So well-being, reconnecting taonga and people. Of course, there's an impact on hauora. Well-being continues to be. It is a difficult and challenging space. It's an emotional space. It's a space that will challenge all of your vulnerabilities as well, because in the presence of taonga and, of course, I guess remnants of your own mātauranga, you are being asked to be Māori. You got to know something, man. You know that your kui is taonga. What do you know? And what are you doing about that, you know?
And I think, and we'll talk about this, and I mean, maybe we'll have a whole season about this, but that sort of leads into the whole idea of repatriation and what that means. And I think also that's a huge part of hauora. Yeah. But it's definitely something that we want to spend a lot of time on in a forthcoming season.
I literally just put repatriation as
she just wrote it down. No, great. And maybe it's that we revisit hauora as well.
Yes.
As we go through the episodes, I'd be interested to see, you know, people, the conversations we have, the people that we interview, what's their take on this as well.
Exactly, yeah.
Or they'll be probably speaking straight to it as well, yeah.
Working with taonga can lift us, challenge us, exhaust us, and teach us, sometimes all at once. And whether taonga are part of your everyday world or you're reconnecting for the very first time, your hauora matters. This brief has reminded us that hauora and well-being isn't something that we just fit in around the work that we do. It's woven through every decision, every karakia, and every moment of reconnection.